Yo, what's up, world? This is Dane Tomas, and you're listening to the Dane Tomas Podcast. Every week, I talk to experts, weirdos, new friends, and old ones about everything from magic to business to creativity and human awakening. So, strap yourself in, lay back and relax, cause we're heading straight for the black hole.
So I have no idea how to start this because it's the first one ever, but I'm sitting here with Janine Maree, the one and only Dark Witch, aka the Town Librarian, aka the Womb Mystery Initiator. Hello.
Hi, Dane.
So thanks for being the first person to do this. I feel that this concept of love and dark is the idea behind this, and really as a contrast frame to the love and light paradigm, I wanted to kind of flip it and go into the idea that everything is love, and all the extremes and polarities are part of it and part of God and part of oneness, and have conversations with people who are holding a much wider frame around that sort of stuff, and explore things like creativity, magic, sexuality, the unconscious mind, all those sorts of subjects, the shadow, and whatever else comes in. And I couldn't think of anyone better to start off with. And let's maybe just start with, how did you get into this world? You joke a lot about coming from a kind of very straight background, but the kind of what you're representing in the world to a lot of people is anything but that. So I'd love to hear about how you found your way into the darkness and all these kind of more alternative and unusual things.
Yeah. I think right from quite a young age I had an awareness, and so I was always kind of looking and searching for answers. So I kind of innately had that. But interestingly, my path into the dark was really through trying to go more into the light. So really going on an ascension path, and then into new age light energies, and wanting to go higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And then discovering, sort of Tantra came onto my radar, but really my appeal of going there was, oh, wow, well, now I can use sexual energy to go more into the light.
Yeah.
But of course, it took me in the other direction because I was polarized. And really where my path was leading me was to integrate the part that I didn't know, which was the dark and the lower chakras and the embodiment pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think we have to do that? For me, a lot of what I was interested in and a lot of the work I've done has been ascension, meditation, clearing my consciousness, becoming, as awake as possible. That was what spirituality meant, I guess, for a long time. And then it became clear that to become more powerful and more, I guess, capable of doing shit in the world, it would embodiment and descent and going into being here was where it was going to be at.
Yeah, I feel like at the soul level, it doesn't matter which direction you go, you end up in the same place, because ultimately the soul's really trying to integrate polarities. But going into the ascendant path first and really getting a mastery over consciousness and awareness, I feel like it's easier to navigate the descent in that, because it's a stronger level of awareness to be able to handle going down into energies that can be quite chaotic and primal and instinctual, and can overtake if there's not a level of consciousness and awareness to be able to hold that. And so, of course, if people go the other way, they do go into the dark, and they go into sexual excess, abuse of drugs, or you really go into dark paths. And if they survive that, if they live through that, quite often they'll end up knocking on the door of the born again Christian church, because they find the light, right? Because the dark's led them all the way to the light,
Yeah, been in the dungeon for a long time. Kind of need something light. One thing that I think is interesting about you is this, during trainings you'll sneak in Christian songs and Jesus music, but then there's this kind of referencing of Satan and darkness and whatever, and these, my interpretation is you're talking about Christ and Satan as archetypal figures, but I don't know if that's even true. How do you relate to Jesus and Satan and these kind of very Christian figures that are, typically the way that's shared is very polarized. You hang out with one and you don't hang out with the other one. That's how it's done, right? I'm all about Christ, and We don't even talk about the other guy. And, you know, as I've been, not even beginning, because I've been into a lot of this for a long time, but I've been revealing more publicly, like a few little shadowy bits and a little more magical bits. Yeah. I've had some interesting feedback of like, oh, you're dabbling in dangerous territory there. And I'm like, oh, they're not these people aren't holding an archetypal view, or they're not looking at like this as a representation of themselves. They're literally thinking there's a guy out there called Satan, and if I talk about him, he's going to show up like Voldemort or something, and everything's going to go bad. And yeah, I guess I'm curious about how do you reconcile, like what does it even mean when we're playing with these ideas or these characters? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so I do see them as archetypal energies, and there's something about personifying an energy, because an energy is really quite abstract, really. Yeah. And because, you know, ultimately there is just one source, but that's way too much for anyone really to get their head around. Yeah. So by finding these bite-sized pieces and feeling and experiencing these different flavors, we can get to know that one whole thing. Yeah. And so you're using Jesus and Satan as archetypal energies represent something, but also when I'm working in a world of supporting people to integrate polarities, those two energies can really show where people are polarized, you know. And so if you're polarized into the light, then everything dark is bad, and so Satan becomes this evil, you know, person to keep away from. And equally, if you're polarized kind of in the dark, then you really don't want to have anything to do with the evangelistic
heavy
Jesus,
metal and like
blah,
whatever.
blah, blah, and that's all seen as whatever. So it can, if there's really the key for me is a charge, you know, and when there's charge on those energies, then it shows what's not integrated and not polarized. And ultimately I see Jesus, Satan archetypes as really, they're the light and dark of the masculine, really. Yeah. So they're a way of working with the energy of the masculine and just breaking it down into another way of working with it. Yeah. To understand it more deeply.
That's so cool. Yeah. I had this piece at uni when I was probably like 20, 21, and I was doing comparative religion, and I think I was telling you, I got into all the Jungian. I didn't do any Christian stuff because I was still a bit like, Christians, you know. But I did do the Jung and Jesus and the Jung and Christianity units. And he, for one, didn't like triangles. So he rearranged the, the Father, the Son, and Holy Ghost. And he made a quaternity, and he had Jesus and Satan as brothers. Right, you know, yeah. So it's like the Father and the Holy Ghost and the two sons, and one representing the animal nature of man and one representing the ascended nature of man, and that they both need each other basically. And also I think he just liked to get it all neat and balanced. He was like, I need symmetry, you know. And I think that for me was the beginning of dropping superstition. It's like, there's people who are into Satan, oh my God, and that's just what you've been raised with, so it automatically triggers fear and terror, and like don't go there, don't even, like, you know, people won't even say the names. Like that's why I made like the Voldemort joke. It's like, don't give it power. He'll come, you know. It's like, what the hell? Yeah. But just, I guess, really playing with the shamanic and playing with the I guess what I see as the Jungian psychology piece of recognizing everything as a representation or a projection or a reclaiming of a part of the self, just changes the whole framework and takes this kind of superstition layer out of it of like, you know, that's not okay. You can't even talk about that.
Yeah. And also too, my own background, like I've got a very strong, which I've talked to you about, like a really strong Catholic thread. So, you know, before I was even born, I was going to, you know, church services once a week. And so a lot of indoctrination. So part of my path was really being in rejection of that and having a lot of charge on the word God, on the word Jesus, and moving more to words of source and divine or other words that weren't religiously charged as a way of trying to integrate what spirituality was to me out of the conditioning. But then I felt like I moved through all that sort of rejection and the loss of not having anything to hang on to, and then discovering other forms and philosophies of spirituality, which then brought me in a full circle of being able to really pierce through to the essence and truth of all philosophies, really, because they're all holding a piece. And so it's quite a celebration for me to be able to welcome in the Jesus archetype the Satan archetype
Yeah.
in celebration, and really be at peace with those, and feel the gifts of those archetypes. It feels like a real full circle integration piece for me as well. Because I think it's a lot of people with Christian backgrounds that where that conditioning constricts.
Yeah, it's super tight.
Yeah, yeah.
And on the other side that you're naming, you know, I had the same thing. So I was expelled from a Christian school, which kind of left kind of a bad taste in my mouth. And I think was drawn to everything else. Buddhism, shamanism, Hindu stuff, you know, Kabbalah, it didn't matter. Just everything else was, I could
Much
see
cooler.
So much cooler. Just anything apart from where I've come from, you know, which was, you know, my family were not particularly religious, but the backdrop of everything, you know, I used to pray. No one got me to do this. When I was a little boy, I would pray to God that bad things wouldn't happen. And I think my prayers were like, I don't want to get into like sex, drugs, or alcohol. And I was like 4.
Oh, that backfired.
Yeah. It's like the secret of like, don't focus on what you don't want, you know? I've had a fairly thorough taste of all those things. So maybe he was granting my wish in a reverse way. But that was the framework. I don't know where I got it from. It's just that was the cultural backdrop of, I guess, the moral structure of the society that I lived in. So even if you're not a practicing Christian, if you're in the Western world, you're probably living in a Christian framework to some degree, more or less.
Well, yeah, totally in a moral good and bad framework, and what's good and what's bad may be different for different people, but it's still living in that way. Of moving through reality.
Yeah. I think it's really recently I was telling you about the Jordan Peterson Bible myth stuff. I'm like, these are archetypal structures of, you know, truth and how to orient yourself in the world, and you know, his obsession with dominance hierarchies and climbing the ladder and all that sort of stuff. It just gave me a context around like, maybe I am good with God the Father. You know, maybe this moral structure has actually been very functional for humans, where I'd always seen it as like, this is just fucked. You know, this is just a mess. It's the worst thing ever. And I think, comparative religion a little bit and integral theory and stuff helped me put it somewhere. But then he kind of, with his love of those myths, I was like, whoa. Driving in the car going, Abraham. Woo.
Well, I think like really exploring spirituality and going into it, I think it's called the I, thou, and the we. There's the different ways we can experience whatever this source or divine is.
Yeah.
And one is it's an energy that's everywhere, that's all one.
Yeah.
Which is going into more philosophies that are talking about source as an energy, experience as an energy. And then there's each of us is a spark of God, so actually we are divine beings, so it's moving from the framework, I am God, and so I can create and be in touch with that energy and bring that through. And then the other one, which is more the Christian framework, is relationship with the divine. So it kind of personifies God as God the Father, God the Son, or however that's expressed. And so then it's like a personal relationship. And so what I've learned is all those ways of relating to the divine are valid. Yeah. And each of them have juice. And it's like, just like anything, if there's charge on one particular way, there's usually something to mine there and gifts there in that particular way of experiencing source. Yeah.
We got deep so quick.
I know, we did.
How does sex come into all this? How do you see sex as being part of the spiritual path?
It's a good question. So I see sex as, or sexual energy actually, rather than the act of sex.
The doing.
Yeah, but the sexual energy is an expression of the life force. And for me, it's more the embodied expression of the life force. So we can ascend and experience source through awareness and stillness and emptiness, or we can descend into matter and experience the ecstatic feeling of divinity embodied in matter. And when we can move with that energy, which some call sexual energy, some call life force, some call kundalini, we can bring that in the body, then we can unite the two and we can have the experience of both in our body, the reality of the ascendant experience, as well as actually the source is ecstatic. It's an ecstatic feeling, and we can embody that and feel it and be in ecstatic relationship to the here and now, not needing to ascend or do a certain amount of tasks or behave in a certain way so we can ascend this reality and go home. We can actually be home now, and home can be inside us, and we can feel and ecstatically experience that in our body.
Yeah. Do you perceive that we're overly stacked in one way as a culture on Earth at this point? Is that a diplomatic?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously it depends which culture you're talking about too. But in the West has tended to more go into ascendant and more go into the mind and into science and into more an ascendant way of being in life and develop those areas, but it's been at the expense of the lower chakras, which more the tribal societies have actually held the energies of the earth and the lower chakras and judged as being less than, but actually holding primitive the potency of the primal earth energy in their traditions. And I feel that collectively we're at a time of integration and of the collective, really. So we're bringing all those together, and I'm feeling that's starting to move in the mainstream. There's starting to be more opening around people interested in embodiment or sexual energy, and starting to free up the shame around it, which is what so much constriction is from. And of course, I think that's probably been part of the development, because rather than those living in those energies and them overtaking by suppressing them, it's created, I guess, more chance for ascendant. And if you go down this way and don't do that, you've got more development here. But at some point, we're about integrating all that. And that's where I kind of feel like we're heading right now.
Because, and it's interesting that the kind of Abrahamic religions are all on this kind of ascension thing, but then, at least in the world that I've been in, you get a bunch of dudes who go do Tantra or go do Buddhism or whatever, and we do the same thing. So it's like, it's hard for me to know whether that's also in those religions or philosophies, which I think it is a bit, this idea of ascending. I mean, it definitely is. But if, particularly the white guy, the white dude conscious bro thing, it's almost like we make it more that because we bring the frameworks we've already got unknowingly. So we're like a Christian who doesn't think we're a Christian. And then we go practice Tantra, and then we overlay like a Christian moral framework over
the top of it.
Without knowing we're doing that. And it becomes the new dogma, basically, of like, oh, no, only the upper chakras. Don't do the lower ones are dirty. We don't do those. Stop having squirting orgasms, ladies, they're wrong, bring it up. There's this kind of like ascension dogma that even though we're in little groups that are people who are sampling various cultures and going and mastering some exotic Eastern discipline or whatever, they've essentially used it in a very similar way.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's this negation of the feminine and negation of the earth, just the same, but now it's in a Tantra yoga package. Yeah. Of just, if your girlfriend has an emotion, tell her to bring it to her, tap her on the third eye.
Bring it up and bring it through send it to the
which
the
can
heavens.
be super useful, but it took, when I went into it, I was like, oh, you guys are like dogmatic as well. And I thought my readings and my grasp of Tantra was the embracing of everything. And it's like, the embracing of everything, but only the upper bit, because it's better.
Because there's still some kind of superiority coming in. I had this awareness one time. I was still on my wanting to discover the truth and the philosophy that was the right one. And I remember I went along to see this person speak that I'd been wanting to see for so many years, and I'd heard this stuff like when he walks in the room, love arrives, and really wanted to be in this place, and so he walks in, and the followers are there all dressed in similar kind of whatever, kind of doing their dogma thing. And it was like in that moment I just really got it. It was like, okay, so really in every philosophy someone has woken up to something directly and experienced it, and they're emanating something different to what everyone else is emanating around it. And then people come up and go, oh, so Dane, really liking your vibe. And so, what do you eat for breakfast? And what's your practice? And what clothes do you wear? Okay, so if I do that, then I can be this. I thought, oh, that's actually what religion is.
Yeah, we shall all eat the bacon.
Yeah.
We shall all sleep until 10 a.m.
We'll chant blah, blah, blah at 3 o'clock. And so, those practices, of course, practices can support the development, so I don't want to negate all practices. But the point is, if ever we're going outsourcing and disconnecting for what's really happening in here and following this, we're never going to really drop into that place where we're vibrating something authentic and tuning in a personal way to what's happening, in a real way, in a way that we're embodying it and living it and feeling it. And that was a really big piece for me. It was the end of the search, and it was my realization, the only absolute truth is there's no absolute truth. That's actually the truth. Yeah.
So let's put that in big letters and let's recite that once daily to remind ourselves.
That's your mantra about that one.
What how do you think people can, especially younger people, like who knows, but people who are maybe on this search path, how do you think they can insulate themselves from this kind of pedestaling, this guruing of like, such and such is amazing, I want to be like them, and then all the psychological shit that's created from doing that? Is there a way that you think people can inoculate themselves from that, or kind of rebalance themselves when they notice they're starting to guruify someone else?
It's a tricky one, because when people first start, they're really looking for reference points, and so it's important to be having different experiences, and it's important to be finding places of resonance where the soul knows there's something to learn here. And with everything, I think there's shadow and there's an integrated place. So there's that place where people project everything out onto that person, completely lose themselves, and then end up doing all kinds of weird stuff because that person said. And of course that's the shadow of a cult, and everyone does a mass suicide or something because the gurus told them. It's the extreme,
as Simon said,
absolutely the extreme thing. But also I've also learned, as I've started taking on more of an elder role, is that there's also times where I can see I'm holding a point for someone. I'm holding something, and it's actually okay for them to project for a little while as they're feeling and experiencing and getting to anchor themselves. And then if the person holding that point is integrated, they know when it's time to hand that back, or that person has enough personal power or soul power to start taking that back, and then it collapses it. So I think that's more of a healthy way of working with that energy. But I guess it's the practices to really support deepening connection here and anchoring here and listening to that no matter what it is. They're the ones that support anchoring and not getting lost in what someone else is saying as to how I should live or what I should eat or everything. Like I'm a naturopath as well. I've had a whole journey in that, and it's the same with diet, right? It's like we're instinctual, intuitive animals, just like wild animals. They don't need to read a diet book to know what to eat. They tune in, and if they're sick, they know which herb, and we've got that, but we forget that.
Just picturing like the Slim Rabbit diary or the
that's right. And so people there's all these looking out here for something to tell them what they should be eating, rather than really tuning in here, coming into the center and really listening to, when I eat this, my life force vibrates and expands, and when I eat this, I deplete and I feel tired. Just really tuning in to the intuitive beings that we really are.
Speaking of you as a mentor, you do a lot of work with the womb. Could you maybe share a little about that, why it's important, what sort of journeys women are having in that area? Like I know it's something that I've noticed coming up more and more on social media, women talking about their blood, women talking about their womb and that sort of thing. Because I'm in a little bit of a bubble as well, I'm not sure how mainstream that is, but I've definitely noticed it. It's almost a buzzword in the little conscious bubbles,
Yeah.
So maybe could you talk a little bit about you know, where does the womb sit in the sort of spiritual context, and what's going on there?
Yeah, it has more recently started to become a buzzword, because what I see is that, you know, collectively the feminine energy is awakening, and so is the masculine, obviously, and we're starting to move into this place where we can see that it's awakening in each body, regardless of male, female body, but we all have masculine and feminine. And so that was really a big part of why I started doing what I started doing many years ago, because I could see this was the energy that most needed to come forward. That's what was going to save the planet, not going into some kind of war to do it, but actually to be feeling the feminine and in tune. That's what was going to change things. But then what I noticed is that the feminine is coming in, but in some ways it wasn't fully anchored, and I realized that really a lot of clearing work was being done, and the openings of the feminine, but really it's not until we really drop into the womb space that we start really anchoring to the maturity of the archetype. And a lot of women aren't connected with their wombs. You know, their experience of their womb is menstrual cramps, having a baby, and other than that, don't really pay much attention to it, don't really know about it, not in tune with it, where actually that's the center of the feminine. It's where her wisdom comes from. It's where her feeling, instinctual, intuitive sense comes from. So the more we can drop in and anchor that point and center in that point and start to strengthen that point, because it's like the masculine center here is quite strong in a lot of people, because we're moving from this place all the time. So there's a strengthening and this muscle down here in the womb that also needs to be given equal billing, so we can move in a more integrated way. So for me, it's the source of a woman's power is the womb, and it's not only connecting it in herself, but by really opening into that energy and the spaciousness, it connects it to the earth womb, which really grounds and anchors her and informs her around primal energies, instinctual energies, animal energies. But it also opens to the cosmic womb as well. So she's sourcing the feminine all the way through, from earth to heaven, because the feminine is in heaven as well.
And, you know, one of the things that I guess became into my field of awareness probably in the last 2 to 3 years is the idea that the womb is energetic as well. So a man can have a womb, a woman who's had her womb removed can still connect to it, which I'm now like, yeah, of course. But when I first heard that, I was like, what the fuck? And I was already into energetic stuff. So I can imagine, particularly, let's say, for a mainstream guy hearing that, it would be like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Could you explain a little bit about how that could be? How can a man have a womb? How can a woman who's had maybe parts of herself removed, how could she be in access to that part of herself?
Yeah, so we've got our physical body that we can touch and feel and see. And then we have an energetic body, and that's more connected to the soul that isn't either masculine or feminine. And so from that place, from the soul place, from the energy body, etheric body, we have a feminine manifestation of that and a masculine manifestation of that. And, you know, in years gone by, most, not all, because there were people experiencing this all the way through, but really we were anchoring certain things. You know, we came in to be a farmer and really master that archetype, and then we might have come in to be a queen and master that archetype, and so things were moving a lot slower. But this place of integration where we're accessing more things and we can start really tuning in, we've got a greater access to these different bodies. And it can sound woo-woo and it can sound really, really strange until the experience happens.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember when I first experienced my phallus, it was like, oh my God, this actually is real. I can feel this, I can sense, I can feel my testicles, I can feel my phallus, I can feel my whole energy be different when I'm in that. And so in a male body, it's the same, that there's an etheric womb, and it's beautiful for women who've had wombs removed to know that as well. Because the womb's removed doesn't mean you're disconnected from your womb energy, because it's etheric, and you can tune into that and become more attuned, better at connecting in with that, so it becomes easier to access by different practices to support that integration.
So for those who are listening to this and not watching it, we're kind of out on Janine's property out at the moment on the Red Earth. You do a lot of your work here. How do you feel the land is involved with your work?
Yeah, well, because I work with the womb and the feminine, so a lot of my work is descending, supporting people to descend into the earth, to descend deeply into matter. And so the way I see it on this land here is I feel like this land called me really, and that it's in partnership with me. It's teaching me, but it's also when people come here and they're doing session work with me, they're also journeying with the land, and the land is supporting that path. Because part of the womb work and the feminine work and connecting with the land is really learning how to work with vibration and energy, and to vibrate with matter, vibrate at the atomic level, actually, right into the intricacies of matter, and to feel that, and the land supports that. And there's ways to access that. We can sit on the land and not notice anything and be in our heads and just stomp through, or we can really tune in energetically and shamanically to the land and move as one with the land, and the land reveals itself through the breeze, or the leaves rustling, or this piece of timber that shape shifts into a guardian to reveal something, and that's without mushrooms.
Janine and I have been having a few chats about the benefits, the pros and cons of psychedelics. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
So I've been doing men's worky stuff for quite a few years now, and the first waves of all that was like, got to be more on purpose, man. Got to get my goals clear. Got to be able to penetrate the world, be more present. Very kind of David Data meets Robert Bly meets the King, Magician, Warrior, Lover sort of stuff. That was the cocktail that I went through, and it really helped me develop. I shared that with a lot of other guys and found other guys teaching that stuff, and those sorts of pieces seem to be the pieces that men were finding and sharing and workshopping. It's all with the King and the Warrior, and there's tons of that stuff. And then in the last, since about 2016, firstly through ISTA, International School of Temple Arts, of which you're like all the things. You're like leadership, faculty, teach. We'll go into that a little bit before the end of this conversation. Through that place was one of the first places I played into physical men going into their feminine, and then through dancing Eros going into men going into the feminine archetypes. And to my knowledge, there isn't a lot of it going on in the world. There's not a lot of people doing feminine initiation for men, funnily enough. But I went through that stuff, and I watched other men go through that stuff, and there's an almost universal agreement amongst us that it was hugely beneficial, and that it started to give us something that, another 100 hours of Vipassana meditation, or, penetrating the woman with presence and dark humor, we already were doing that, and we were already practicing that stuff, but stepping into the feminine changed fucking everything. And at the time I was like, I don't think other men are going to be ready for, I think I'm just special. And what I've seen over the last year and months is that actually more and more men are open to that and interested in that. And I was just curious on your take of what are the benefits for male-bodied humans stepping into the feminine and doing any of these kind of work, whether it's womb work or feminine archetypes or whatever.
Yeah, it's such a great question, because we can go and do all this stuff, but actually, how does that make a difference in my day-to-day life?
Yeah, and that's what, I love this magical reality we're playing in, and these deep concepts we're working with, but I really want, in the way that I get into it, for people to listen and go, oh, so if I do this, I'll get that.
Yeah.
And especially if they haven't done it, like once they do it, that might be less important. But if they're like, oh, why the fuck would I? I'm I'm a builder. Why would I do a womb journey, So yeah, what's your take on the benefits of that sort of work for men?
Yeah. So first I want to start just referencing what we talked about earlier when we were talking about how by developing the consciousness awareness piece, it supports us to more easily then hold going into the lower chakras and the descent. And so in a way it's a similar thing. Like I think it's the men's work is really important for male bodies that have got testosterone going through them, and obviously not all male bodies experience it in the same way. But anchoring the masculine archetypes and the points, then having some mastery over that supports the male body to then start opening to these feminine archetypes. And a lot of men go into fear around that because, they've just really anchored this part of their masculine and they've got their purpose and their penetration. And then what happens if I start opening to my feminine energy? Am I going to become all girly? And women's still going to be attracted to me? And how does that all work? But what I notice is that when a male body starts to really open into his feminine, what I notice is he starts to feel more for a start, starts to feel emotionally. He starts to feel more frequency and vibration in his body. And what it actually does is it really fine-tunes his masculine, and his masculine becomes, for me, much more integrated and whole and able to move through the world even more fully than before, because now he can sense and feel like at his phallus energy with his purpose and the penetrating purpose that wants to go into the world. Now we can actually sense and feel where does that need to go and how to do that in a way that the world opens to what he has to offer, not in a way that he's pushing through before the world's ready and then dealing with the repercussions of that, which is really what we see with war, I guess, and an extreme version of that. So, by integrating these feminine pieces, I notice more feeling in the body. I notice that when I'm in a man's presence with his feminine, I can feel him vibrating. When my body touches his, they vibrate together. So there's actually really sensorial changes in the body that happens when the feminine opens. Becomes more intuitive. It becomes not... So the linear can still happen, but the linear is now happening also with flow and synergy with those around him. So not so much fragmenting and fracturing relationships, because I can move forward with my purpose, but I can also do that in synergy with those around me because I have the womb piece. I'm not losing myself in that synergy, but I'm also not throwing out things because my purpose is the most important thing at the expense of everything.
Getting a bit less jabby.
A little bit less jabby, but still penetrating actually very deeply. But now the heart's there, love's there, life force is there. So the penetration actually is, whether it's actually sexually with the person or whether it's how we're penetrating life, becomes so much more potent. It's like also the testicles, like the testicles are charged with potency then too, because when it's all up here, they're not. When they anchor into the earth and we bring the feminine through as well, that brings the power through, the potency of the seed becomes more potent as well.
Nice. That's beautifully expressed. Especially the part with, we're talking penetration of the partner or the feminine or the sexual partner, but we're also talking penetration of the world and the seducing open of the world. And, for me, I've noticed it used to be, well, if I want something, I go fucking get it. It's like the rule is, if I want something, I go and I get that thing and I claim it's like I'm hunting with a spear, And then the more I became aware, I think I've been doing this the whole time, but the more I realized that it was the feminine part, it's the more I found the ability to draw things in. And it was like, those things that I wanted to experience just happened. I didn't have to hunt them down. I just called them in. And I think for me, that's beyond, every guy that I know wants to be better in bed. But I think beyond that, for me, it's become about alchemy of, I want to access all aspects of myself and magically speaking, to have the power and ability to create what I want. I know that actually it's the feminine and it's, Shakti means power, and it's actually, that's what's governing the physical world. And for me, it's that journey of wanting to integrate those parts and continue to do that is really about life mastery and being mastery of, oh, well, I'm here. I want to be all the things that I can be, and I want to be able to navigate the world with the maximum flexibility and potency. And yeah, for me, just sometimes, really small drop-ins. The first little, I would think I was in my feminine for an hour, and then afterwards being like, I'm kind of permanently different. Let alone going in the kind of deep dives that are happening inside ISTA and happening in a few other containers that are popping up.
Yeah.
That I think as men we've had so little conscious access to that part that even a small amount is like life-changing.
Yeah, because it's also a source of energy, really. So,
Yeah.
you see that part of the masculine who's really on task with purpose, and then of course at the end of that is burnout.
Yeah.
Burnout, or there's some kind of failure because actually the soul's really wanting to get to integration anyway. So that the burnout and the stress of being on purpose at the expense of the body, or eating or sleeping, or all those different things which are part of what the feminine can tune into. Yeah, so not only practically is there more balance, but the feminine awakens life force in the body. So it's power that's being charged, but also energy. And that activates, like you were talking about, the magnetic. That's such a key part.
Yeah.
So it's both. Like we can penetrate the world, we can also call. And when those things are in balance, life becomes more easeful, and there's more flow. And actually we get more done than before, but it's more fun.
It's a lot more fun.
It's more joyous,
Yeah.
more easeful.
Can you tell us a bit about ISTA and your role inside of ISTA? Like, what is it and that stuff? Like, I share, those people who follow me would have seen my shares and my journeys with it over the last couple of years, and they would know a little bit, but I'd love to hear from someone who's so involved and so central to it, what it is and what it's about, and all
it's
that kind of stuff.
Big question.
Yeah. Whatever you feel to share. Don't feel you have to exhaustively nail it, but
of course. So it stands for International School of Temple Arts. And so International School of Temple Arts it's a group of people that have come together to bring the temple arts into embodiment, into the world at essence. But it's so much more than that on so many levels, because not only is it supporting people to really activate their life force and move into their personal power and integrate the soul piece and integrate their light and dark and their spirit and matter, and really work with sexual energy and all those things, but also we're exploring how to move in the world in a different way. So we call ourselves an organism as opposed to an organization, and where the way we're moving in the world is so different, where we're not wanting a top-down organization that's got a stereotype business structure.
There's no CEO.
There's no CEO. The center of ISTA, who's actually in charge of ISTA, is the mystery, the black hole. And that source that, if we can really listen to it, is revealing all the time. So it's like a bottom-up model. So it's quite scary at times, because it's like, is something going to reveal, or what if it doesn't, and is this actually going to work? But ISTA is really flowering. Like when we made that switch and really started moving in that way in the world, it just keeps revealing itself. It keeps telling us what needs to happen next. It's almost like it's become bigger than all of us. It pulls in what it needs, releases what it doesn't need, and it's so alive. So ISTA's not a set curriculum that's we rinse and repeat. It's organic and alive, and even though there's foundational pieces that are coming through, every training's different, depending on the group of people, the land, and the next piece it wants to reveal through the organism. So it's this continual emergence of it's almost like it's a space where something can come through and be continually revealed into the world, because we're not there trying to control it with our minds and structure.
And to bring that into a really smaller chunk level.
Great.
Because I'm feeling all the people that I know be like, wow, that's amazing, and I'm feeling I'm going, so what does that mean? There's 3 main trainings, right?
Yeah.
And I've done all of them, and I've done one or two a few times now, a couple of times for 2 and 3 times for 1, and I've witnessed what you're talking about, that they're all completely different, yet the same intention for each one, the same theme permeates, and different lead teachers bring it through in a different way, and different places bring the energy through in a different way. Could you sort of talk about practically, not what happens? This is going to be a real thread on these podcasts where it's like, okay, we're not going to talk about any of what happens in people's rituals or containers or whatever, but on a real practical level, why would someone go and do, say, ISTA level 1?
Yeah. So ISTA level 1 is a place to repattern your personal story. So it's really looking at your neurology that you've come in with and the conditioning around it, and repatterning it not so much at the belief level, but at the neurological level and at the shamanic level. So the rituals are to support that repatterning so that we can be moving in the world in a different way. And also it's about anchoring archetypes. It's anchoring the masculine and feminine archetypes. So we can really get those polarities anchored in the body, and then we can move along that keyboard however we want, however we choose to express it. But it's from a place of being anchored in both of those poles, not kind of flipping around, not quite sure, not quite grounded in any of it.
I think, one of the things for me that's been really beneficial and really give me a lot of insight as well as practical benefits is this anchoring of the masculine and the feminine as something that everyone has, rather than, what I see in the neo-tantric world. The dominant sort of narrative in that world is very much the sort of David Data model of like men are Shiva and women are Shakti, and there's almost an objectification of no, you don't have Shakti, you are that because you're a woman, so you're only that, and if you're producing behaviors that aren't that, stop that and be more feminine, and myself, and I think probably a lot of other people have tried to live up to that. It's like we learn this stuff, we get into Tantra, it's like, okay, I've got to be more Shiva, I've got to be more present. I'm pretty present, but I've got to be even more present, and I've got to lead too, because that's my job. And I think, as you put it, anchoring those archetypal energies really started to free me up of like, oh, these are both here, and they're both here all the time. And it's not an either or, it's like they're dancing inside, and it's maybe more like a sliding scale. I think my old model was kind of all or nothing. It's like you're in your masculine or you're in your feminine. Yeah. And then it became more like a little sliding dial. Fluid. Yeah, and then it became more like a dance of like, oh, well, it's constantly shifting, and they're interacting with each other constantly. And I think that understanding of kind of embodied divine marriage of those two parts is probably going to really spread, because I think where the world is at now with the ideas around gender fluidity and all that sort of stuff becoming more and more prevalent, it's getting difficult to teach a Shakti Shiva thing that's a fixed, people aren't really, especially younger and younger people, they aren't really signing up for that. They're not going to opt into that. What you think? So just that I'm a man, that I have to be the one who's present, but what if I don't want to be present? What if I want to be my feelings? And I think ISTA is one of the few places that is presenting an alternative model that will work in the new world, I think.
Well, it's really supporting bringing awareness and giving practical ways to integrate something that just is anyway. Yeah. Because regardless of where people think they are or what they're experiencing, the reality is they do have a masculine and feminine aspect. That's like that's a given, because we're an expression of the divine, and there's a masculine and feminine aspect of that. And so if we're not aware of that, or we're polarized one way, then we're still interacting with that feminine, but it's outside. We're kind of outsourcing, projecting that out. And that's pretty much what relationship drama is, because ultimately the soul's trying to integrate that piece. And so the more we can start moving into what's actually going on in here and start seeing what's happening in this relationship, all of a sudden what's going on out there starts to make a lot more sense. And the more functional this becomes and less codependent and enmeshed this becomes, then that starts to be reflected out there. And everyone's got different views about the world, but my view is that everything out there is a reflection of what's going on in here. So it's really an inside job. It's all an inside job. Whatever our charge and polarity is out there, it's always an inside job. It doesn't mean we can't move through the world and create change, but we're not doing it from a place of war, trying to attack that place outside ourselves that we haven't integrated in us. The gender war collapses once you get this piece. That piece, the gender wars stop because the gender wars are here.
Wow.
Yeah.
For anyone listening to audio, the pointing is
I'm doing a lot of hand movements.
Yeah. For all the talk about masculine, imagine pointy hand movements, and all the feminine, imagine kind of seductive drawing in movements, and you're not missing much else as long as you can imagine that part.